Welcome to another session. I hope you were well. In today's session, I want to provide some further um, signs and symptoms and suggestions with regards to the whole concept of depression, but more importantly, fatigue. Now, I started 2 or 3 sessions ago with regards to this whole fatigue conversation, and I made reference to how if you go back in over the past 30, 40 years, in the medical field, there was something that was called TATT. It was an acronym. It stood for tired all the time. In the sessions that I covered prior, the 2, 3 sessions, I made reference to how we in the West, the United Kingdom, in my case, how we are fatigued. We have more technological advancements. We have more agricultural advancements. We have more access to infrastructure. We earn much more than we've ever had. We're living longer than we've ever had. We suffer less. We haven't been exposed to as much wars as we used to in the past. With all of these blessings and advantages that we seem to be fortunate to have at our disposal, for some reason, we are fatigued much more than our forefathers. We are fatigued much more than people who came before us for whatever reason. I'm just talking about the what. Maybe we might understand the why in other sessions that follow. But the key point is that we are generally more fatigued, and it's transforming itself in many ways into depression, anxiety certainly, depression as the end goal. And the question I posed in the session prior was, now what are the symptoms? How do you know that you're not spending more than you're generating? I made reference to the fact that, like any system, you have inputs, you have outputs. What happens in between is key. If the work expended far exceeds the energy delivered, then you have a negative state of equity of energy. If the work expended is less than the energy delivered, you have a reduced state, or what I would call a surplus state in the system. The human body works very similar to any other mechanical system because it is a system in itself. It has parts, and those parts require energy. The energy is generated, the energy is delivered, the energy is transmitted, the energy is used. If we use too much, we pay a price. If we use more than we have, we pay a price. So there are symptoms with regards to fatigue, which is what most people start with. Those who have cases and experiences of depression will tell you it often begins not in the mind, like most people, like myself, used to think, but it starts in the physical body. Tiredness, fatigue, not feeling well. It also transmits to something mental or emotional. But in today's session, I want to go through a list of things that I think could be of some value. I made a list. Let's start with the physical part. Physical fatigue is what happens when the body feels that it has no more to give, too little to give, relative to what is being demanded of it. So the body goes into a physical fatigue state to stop you and me from expending more energy than we have. Reason being, if we expend more energy than we have, our cells start to act in a manner that is not consistent with how they were supposed to function. We find also that we start to go through serious biological issues, organ failures. If it persists long enough, death. So the body goes through a state of physical fatigue as a way of signaling to you, the driver, something isn't right. Stop. Just stop and check. We also have mental fatigue. The mind and the brain are not synonymous terms. People conflate them, but they're not. But in this particular instance, let me use this, although I said mental fatigue. Most people understand that the brain uses a certain amount of energy. Think about this. There are times when I wake up in the morning, and I know for you this to be the case. You wake up in the morning and you feel great. There are other times you wake in the morning and you feel rough. Sometimes as I go through the day, I feel great. Sometimes as I go through the day, I feel rough. If I've had a fast, I don't have as much energy beyond a certain length of time. If I've just had a good meal, a rich meal, I find I have got energy after a certain period of time. So our brain uses, despite weighing about 2% at the point, say at birth, our brain weighs about 2%, but tends to use 10 times his weight in energy. So the brain needs about 20% of energy, or the energy generated by the food and by the various systems, the mitochondria, etc., etc. The point of this is to say you can feel mentally fatigued because there is poor energy delivery to your brain or poor energy delivery to other organs in your body. The brain will fatigue you, slow down and say, I can't give you more, or you need to rest, or something isn't right. Pain is another symptom of fatigue. The body switches sometimes if you exert the body far beyond what it can give you. In other words, it's like a horse that has been ridden and you keep riding and riding and riding, and you never stop for a drink or for a meal or for rest. And at some point in time, the horse just falls down and gives up. It was the straw, that last straw, that extra 200 yards, that may have caused it to fail, but it was exerting so much more than it was getting back long before then. And you as the rider, one of the things you have to learn how to do is read the signs and the symptoms. Understand the noises being made by the horse, and whether it's still strutting as it should. And if you're a very, I wouldn't use the word intelligent, but if you're a very attentive horse rider, you know very quickly that it's time to rest, because you understand the horse is just like a machine. It needs water and fuel and energy and rest, so that all the heat being created in his body can dissipate without any injury. So pain is something that the body creates. The body sometimes will switch to anaerobic metabolism as a way, because it cannot produce energy in its natural way. But in many ways, it's simply saying, you've pushed me to the point. I cannot do this aerobically. I'm going to try and do this anaerobically. And in the process, I might produce lactic acid. In the short term, it seems as though we've got more energy. The long term, it's just a minefield of mess and disaster. Pain, therefore, is something we should listen to. We get chest pain, we get head pain, we get body pain, we get heart pain. And all of this are symptoms that we're using too much energy. But let me talk about the mental side, because I think that's important. There are certain unpleasant mental symptoms and signs. Whenever you feel stressed, it's an indication that you're using too much energy than you have. Your energy delivery isn't at the optimal state. Your energy generation is perhaps not optimal. Or your energy expenditure is beyond what the body can give you. So feeling stressed is one mental symptom and sign. Feeling depressed is another mental symptom and sign. Feeling anxious is another mental depression symptom and sign. Feeling antisocial in your interactions. Some people, for example, get to a point where they can't engage in social activities. Why? Because it is very taxing. I don't know about you, but socializing is hard work. Some people do it effortlessly. Some people are great at small talk. But the ability to walk into a room and say, look at someone, shake them and say, this is my name, what do you do? But also allow yourself to go in with the dance, and sometimes realize that during the conversation, maybe you deviate from a position that is taken. And so suddenly you find yourself having to debate or argue or put forward a position that other people do not agree with. And all of that energy exchange can be exhausting. So feeling antisocial in your interactions is a sign that perhaps you're spending too much energy and you're fatigued. Feeling anxious, I mentioned earlier, is another sign. For whatever reason, you feel anxious. You've been invited to a party, you feel anxious. Someone is coming to visit a friend of yours and you're going to be there, you feel anxious. A test is coming soon, an exam, you feel anxious. Even sometimes walking into the office in the morning, you feel anxious. Your husband or your wife is about to return. You feel anxious. I'm not suggesting this to be the only reason why. I'm saying this could be a sign. Remember, what we're looking for is the root cause. We're applying what I call a process of elimination. You're trying different things to see which works. You're trying out and putting it in place. Management plans, corrective steps to see whether your hypothesis of being depressed or feeling depressed is correctly diagnosed. I'm not saying this is the be all and the end all. Now, in addition to that, if you feel and look tired, there are times when maybe I do so right now, who knows, but there are times when I feel tired. My body's saying, I need rest. Or my body's saying, I need fuel. Or my body's saying, you're giving me the wrong fuel, and therefore I can't deliver this in the right way. Or my body's saying, all of the fuel you're generating, for some reason, there's a blockage. It would be the same thing as you have this great house, you have a pipe, you have water, but there's a restriction in the pipe work. The water cannot flow to the rest of the house. And you're thinking, I know I have water. I've just tested it at the mains stopcock. There is water coming to the house, but there isn't water coming out from the various outlets. Why? There could be a blockage. So sometimes the body's telling you, I'm tired, I'm fatigued, I can't do more. Why? Not enough energy. Now, in many ways, when we start to use social addictions, it is an indication that we are not generating enough energy. There are some people who love to be social butterflies, or people who love to be around other people, and they cannot sit still or listen to the still small voice within them. They cannot function independently. They cannot do things independently of others. They need people. Why? Because they need the energy and the stimulation of other people. They do not have any energy of their own, so they lean on other people's energy sources. That could be a sign you do not have enough energy. Some other people rely and use prescription drugs, paracetamol, or any form of medication, either to numb a pain or to give you a false sense of energy. I talked about coffee, energy drinks, and food. In the UK, we've made the assumption that some of the Class A drugs are to be avoided, and some of the foods we eat are to be lauded. I beg to differ. I think we are addicted to sugars and carbohydrates, and our addiction to sugars and carbohydrates and the damage it causes over the long term far exceeds some of the Class A drugs that we have, such as marijuana, to use a good example, exceeds alcohol, the use of alcohol, and even exceeds the consumption of things like tobacco. Sugar does more harm over the long term in terms of the life of a person. But we don't understand it, so we tend to lean on prescription drugs and socially acceptable addictions and socially acceptable food. In addition to that, let me leave you with the following. If you find that you're procrastinating a lot, if you find that you're always having challenges in the bedroom, you have poor libido for whatever reason, if you feel that you're always ill, you always have a cold, your body's always run down, it means that there isn't enough energy being delivered to your immune system, and therefore your immune system cannot fight with its standing army against invaders. A constant lifestyle where you feel down, you're not operating at your best, undoubtedly will cause you to believe that something is wrong with you. Remember your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, your lifestyle. And suddenly what you might find is, in the absence of knowledge and in the presence of ignorance, you will start to have worry and doubt. It will manifest itself in the form of fear in your mind. Fear has to be expressed through the physical body, which is the only way it can express itself, in the form of anxiety. Whenever we feel anxious, going back to energy, we suppress our anxiety because we think something is not right, but maybe this drug, this social engagement, or this drink will make me feel better. So we suppress our anxiety. That leads to depression. If we don't solve that over time, that is to disease and disintegration, and then we find ourselves dead. We don't have to go down that pathway. There are steps we can take to change the trajectory, to change our destination, to change our direction. But it begins with going through what I've shared so far, which is the objective and the subjective way, and sit down and say, well, on a process of elimination basis, what are the symptoms? What are the relevant symptoms that I can observe about myself or my loved ones that would help me start that process of elimination, so I can remove things that are not necessarily the cause, and I can focus on the bigger picture of things that could be the cause. Now, I hope today's session has been useful. I'll conclude this whole fatigue session with one more, in which I'll talk about how do you know when you have the right level and you're in the right state, and therefore you're liking the whole experience that other people feel about being fatigued. There's certain things that you can, similar, objective, subjective, focusing on symptoms, relevant symptoms, to say, my body seems as though I'm performing in the right way. Now, the key thing is to understand, again, like weaving a tapestry, we don't just start and say that this is it. We start with one piece and we add another piece and we add another piece. When I share in the next session that follows, ways through which you can check and see that perhaps your energy delivery, energy generation, energy expenditure is adequate, that does not mean automatically you dismiss the whole concern that you might have about depression. It just simply means that you have the right fuel. It means the fuel has been delivered properly, but it doesn't mean that the car is in its optimal state. We may need to go further and check and see, well, do the accelerators perform as they should? Can you change gears as regularly as you should, etc., etc. Now, I hope today's session has been of some value.